Okay, we see a few early birds here. Just wanted to welcome everybody to today's program. We will be starting here in about 10 minutes. We're excited to present the third part of our series on Preservation Design Award-winning projects. Today's program is entitled Creative Rehab in Action, and we will have three projects presented in succession for about 10 to 12 minutes each. And then we will close with a breakout room portion where you will be able to choose the room in which you'd like to join and ask questions. So we encourage you to think about your questions early and then save them for the portion when we all break out into different breakout rooms. Just a reminder, if you haven't been in the earlier programs in the series, you will have the opportunity to activate and enable your microphone and video, but we ask that you please keep those turned off until the start of the breakout room session. So we will have plenty of time for your questions and discussion at the end of the program. We have about 150 people signed up today, so there might be a lot of questions. So if you ask those early, it's more likely to be addressed. We'll start here in about 8 minutes. Okay, it's 11:54. Just wanted to speak up again so you can adjust your microphone, or I'm sorry, your speakers. Also wanted to remind people that we do have a People's Choice Award component for this year's Design Award. And in a minute here, we'll paste into the chat box the link to visit if you'd like to vote for your favorite Design Award-winning project. You can look at the project award pages by visiting our website at https californiapreservation.org/programs/awards, and you'll find a listing of all the projects on that website. We will be having this Thursday's Design Award program at 6 p.m. Pacific. If you haven't registered, you can still visit our website to pre-register for this program. We look forward to seeing you there. And if you have any questions, you can always use the chat box for today's program. And we'd love to hear where you're coming from. We see 12 people in the room so far, so we'll get more people logging in as we get closer to 12 noon. And thank you for joining us today.
Recording in progress.
Hello, John.
Hello.
Welcome, everybody, to the webinar today. This is going to be one in our awards showcase series, and we're very excited to see everyone. John, do you want to give an introduction?
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for coming today. We had quite a few people signed up, so I think there's still people filtering in. So as we get started, for those of you who are currently logged in or watching us on Facebook or YouTube, just a reminder that today's program will be an hour in length, 30 minutes of which will be presentations or short sort of vignettes from our project participants, three projects today, and then we'll move into breakout rooms, and you will have an opportunity to choose your breakout rooms. We also have time for questions at the end, but we recommend that you save those questions for the end, and you can use the chat box to ask those questions of our panelists, but we do really encourage you during the breakout room sessions to activate your video and microphone. But until then, we ask that you please...
But not yet.
That's right. So please keep your video and microphone turned off. I should have that disabled by default for everybody. But you do have the ability to turn it on. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Madrid French to thank our sponsors and maybe get us started here.
It is going. Thank you, John. I am Chris Madrid French. I'm Director of Development. And indeed, thank you to all of our sponsors who help make these programs free for everyone. We actually are broadcasting worldwide on 5 different social media platforms live. So we're very happy to have all of you with us today. I wanted to remind everybody, John's going to put in the chat And we do like you to use the chat the entire time that we have our program. If that window does bother you, you can pull it to the side. But if you'd like, you can post in the chat right now where you're calling in from. And John is going to post in the chat the link to registration for our award ceremony coming up this Thursday at 6 o'clock Pacific time. And it's going to be very special. And you can participate by voting in our People's Choice Awards, which John is also going to be posting the link for that. I have John very busy right now. What I'd like to do is we have 3 projects. We're going to start with the Darling Hotel and then talk about Geneva Car Barn and then the Presidio Theater. So I will start with the Darling, and I believe Matt is in there. And so if you'd like to start your camera, I can show your slides and we can talk about the Darling Hotel.
It says that the host has stopped it.
Oh,
So-
I'm going to start. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Good morning or afternoon.
Just let me know with next when you want to go to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah. So good morning, Matt Ainley. I'm a engineer in Visalia, California, and the project that I'm presenting is the Darling Hotel. This is a adaptive reuse and rehab of a historic building. It's one of our higher levels of historic significance in Visalia. So this was a multi-year project that began in 2018 and was opened and completed in 2020. The project was a 1933 kind of a LA Art Deco building that was built as an annex to the original county courthouse. The county courthouse was in the middle of the town square of Visalia, and that was built in 1876. And so that this was an annex to that, built in the 30s. It was a WPA project. It's board formed concrete and rebar. And it was then in the 50s, there was an earthquake out of the Tehachapi region that damaged the original courthouse. It was slated for demolition. And so the county of Tulare took that down and left this building standing, which was at the time it was housing the county services. So the county clerk, assessor, tax collector, board of supervisors, all that type of stuff, until it was moved out to a new location in the 60s. All right, you can go to the next slide. So this is the pictures of that. You can see this is the annex building after it was completed. The bottom right picture is a picture of this building connected to the original county courthouse, which you can see actually was at the time probably fairly comparable to almost a state capitol. Visalia was one of the older cities in California, and this was one of the earlier courthouses to be built. Yeah, next slide. So that's a pretty good picture of what the building looked like when we started it. I was the lead developer and one of the owners of the project that we bought from the county as part of a RFB process or request for purchase. It had been abandoned for 12 years at the time. It hadn't been occupied since early 2000s when it was being used as social services for the county of Tulare. And so when we bought it, this is pretty much the state or that's shortly thereafter, but that was pretty much the state before we started, or when we started demolition. You can see some pictures of the painting process. So as you can see from the previous slide, this building had been painted into this beautiful peach color that lasted most of my childhood memories of the building. So we restored it back to what we could tell was the original color, which was this kind of off-white color. And keep going. Some internal pictures of what it looked like. The lobbies, for the most part, had been untouched throughout the years. They were just in pretty massive disrepair. Once you left the lobbies and went out into the wings, they were pretty much a hodgepodge of various decades of office remodels the county had done, T-bar ceiling, and you could tell the stuff that was from the 80s or from the 90s. But as far as the main lobbies on each of the floors, they were still had the original floors, all the original walls. A lot of the light fixtures were damaged or missing, but we harvested all the light fixtures throughout the building and refurbished them, and got them all refunctional, and then replaced or reset the ones that were in all the lobbies. But yeah, had all the original terrazzo floors. They were just really damaged. So you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next one, Chris.
Let me see. Maybe she may have lost her. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, go back. You can go back one.
All right, I think I froze.
No problem. A couple of the design elements. The top right is a picture of the original lobby ceiling. We actually did very little to that ceiling besides just clean it off a little bit, but that's actually a before and after picture of the lobby ceiling. Bottom left are a couple of the original brass light fixtures. These are after we've repaired and replaced the frosted glass, and restored all the kind of inner workings of those. And then the bottom right is a picture of some of the tile elements and countertops that were used. Top left is a light fixture that's actually not an original light fixture, but one that was added. You can go to the next slide. Again, this is the main lobby. This is about a floor and a half above grade. And so you can see the before picture on the far right, and then the after picture on the left. That is the picture on the far right is actually missing the original light fixture that's on the left side. At the time that was in the middle of demolition, we had already taken that light out and stored it, and we're in the process of restoring the functionality of it. The glass was all damaged and most of it was gone, and so that's the original light fixture that sat in the middle of the lobby. You can see the polished terrazzo at the end, but the before and after, and then those are all the same doors and glass that were repaired. And then the background, in the kind of foyer before you come into the lobby there, you can see again on the demolition pictures, the original light fixtures had already been removed for restoration. And then on the left one, you can see the original light fixtures that were restored and put back up. A few more pictures. This is we kept the original elevator that was in the center. Had to replace. We did a full kind of refurbishment of it. That's the original cab is there, and we had a hard time. It's real tricky trying to keep under the slated or the spec'd weight for the elevator. So in doing that, we had to actually come up with some creative ways. So that's actually a wallpaper that was added in order to try to keep. We couldn't add any more weight to the walls. So there was some tricks to this without fully replacing the elevator. So considering we used the original cab and they just restored all the motor elements and updated all the code items. That's the main elevator. Bottom right again is just a prior to construction picture, and then the upper right is a picture of one of the completed hotel rooms. These are primarily the pictures of the completed bathrooms in the suites. That's a kind of a typical bathroom. One of the executive suites has a clawfoot tub in it, which is a picture of that. Bottom right is some of the public bathroom space with some of the tile elements. And you can see we really took the Art Deco and tried to kind of bring it up to some modern touches and finishes, but kept as much of the elements and materials that would have been used in that era. Top right that's a picture of the bathrooms when the building was purchased, and then actually the bottom right is that same bathroom. But you can go next one. So on the fourth floor, a part of the original building on the bottom on the far right picture, that was the Board of Supervisors chamber for the county, and it was all cased in mahogany. You can see some of the original windows. We actually kept all the original windows with all the, we fixed as much of the functional hardware. In the end, we had to screw the windows shut for some safety requirements, but we kept all the original windows, and that's mahogany. And what we did is we actually converted that into 2 of the executive suites. So what you're seeing on the left is the green room. That's one of the executive suites. You can see the mahogany that was all restored in the background, and then infilled with some modern wallpaper. And so that's what that part is. Go next slide. So this is one of a bit of the more creative elements. So the 5th floor of the building was essentially the roof and the mechanical room. There was kind of a mechanical, large, like kind of mechanical doghouse or large room on the 5th floor, and then two rooftop decks. This was a big part of our structural analysis. We hired a firm out of Washington, D.C. called Stillman and Associates, who worked with my California structural engineer to do the analysis of and the whole building model of this. So this was where we converted to a restaurant on the rooftop. So top left was actually removed 90 tons of old steel and metal out of, that was the mechanical equipment. We moved all the mechanical equipment to the 6th floor. Obviously, the current mechanical equipment takes up a lot more space than the old air handlers did. And so this is a restaurant with 2 rooftop decks. In the next slide. Picture the outside. We added a pool, and you can kind of see that so what's interesting about this building too is that the plates are 16-foot plates on between each floor. So it actually starts 8 feet below ground. Then the second floor is 8 feet above ground, and then 16 feet each floor for that. And we added a swimming pool on the south side, take advantage of the warm summers, provide a bit of a respite for hotel guests. In the next slide. That's a picture of the top left of what the rooftop deck looked like when it was purchased. And then the other pictures are some of the completed eating areas, dining areas for the restaurant. That's it.
All right.
Good.
Thank you,
Yep.
Matt. And now we're going to go straight to the next project, which is Geneva Car Barn. And we'll see you back here, Matt, when we do the Q&A. And it's going to take me a second to get your PowerPoint started. So Tori, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I was going to let Kent start and then take over from there.
All right, I'm going to pull up your slideshow right now so you
Great.
can all introduce yourselves and we'll get right into it. How's that look?
Fantastic. Thank
Okay.
you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kent Chang. I'm a principal and also the project architect of Geneva Car Barn and Powerhouse renovation. Thank you so much to the California Preservation Foundation for giving us this honor. And we also want to thank the Friends of Geneva Car Barn, as well as San Francisco, City of San Francisco, and also the San Francisco Rec and Park. They're wonderful and essential collaborators in this project, without everybody working so hard toward this goal, we would never have completed this project. So thank you so much. And now I want to pass to Tori.
Hi, I'm Tori Walcott-Green. I'm a member of the Adlin Darling team, and I led this project through the construction phase. I also want to note 2 key members of our team who couldn't be here today. That would be Joshua Adlin and Rosalind Cole. Next. So built in 1901 as the home of San Francisco's first electric railway, the Geneva Car Barn and Powerhouse is one of the last physical reminders of this original system. But the buildings were severely damaged in the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. And were subsequently saved from demolition by a group of community members that Kent just mentioned called the Friends of Geneva Car Barn. with the intent of protecting and restoring this building. Next. Finally, in 2009, the design team was hired and a collaborative effort began between the Friends and the City of San Francisco and the Rec and Park Department to adaptively reuse this building as a community cultural and education center. In the 29 years between when this space was mothballed and the start of construction in 2018, water damage and time had both further deteriorated the already aging and earthquake affected structures. So in this image, the concrete ceiling of the Powerhouse was crumbling such that you could see straight through to the sky from the inside. There was grass growing in the turbine pits, which you can see under this dancer here. And every interior and exterior surface basically was in need of repair. The decay and the lack of seismic stability really required that our rehabilitation work touch every surface. Next. So from the time it opened until it closed in '89, the building retained its original use as part of the electric rail line system, and it remains in an area that is a very active municipal transportation center. It's not only surrounded by current modern rail lines, but also the Balboa Park BART station just across the street. It's comprised of two distinct parts: the two-story brick office building, which you can see in the upper left corner, and just below that, the other black and white image is the tall single-story, single-room, really, brick and concrete powerhouse, which was the space that generated the electricity for the trains. Phase one of this project transformed just the powerhouse, and we turned it into a 300-person community performance and event space. And we're hoping phase two to rehab the office building side will be coming soon. Next.
So this project really comprises of three main goals. Number one, obviously, to stabilize the building, because at that time it was so deteriorated, the building could have fallen at any moment. So stabilization, making sure the building does not deteriorate any further. And then secondly is to preserve as much history of the building as possible. And when we say history, we don't mean just the fact that the building itself is old. We actually even respect the graffiti that has accumulated over the decades. And we sort of see that as a history of the evolution of this building and how it is really part of the community, and it sort of evolved as part of the community. And the third aspect of it is, at the same time that we're trying to preserve the history of this building, we're also trying to look forward and trying to find a new life for this building so it can serve the community in a brand new, more relevant way. So those are essentially the three components of our goal. And I think the success of the project really takes all three aspects to be done equally well in order for it to be successful. So for example, one of the things that we try to do is that we try to preserve as much of the graffiti and the patina as much as we can. We try to keep as much of the brick as possible, even though some of the brick really has fallen apart so much that we had to replace it. So it's a very painstaking process where we review every part of the building where the brick is beyond repair. We try to find brick that and color match it to match the surrounding bricks, for example. And where possible, we scrape out the lead paint and we leave as much of the original surfaces and plaster as much as we can. And where we actually have to replaster, for example, we would actually choose a slightly different color. So therefore we know which part is the old plaster, which one's a new plaster. So in other words, none of the preservation work was done to disguise or to match, but really to really allow it to be part of the interweaving of the old and the new, and where we really need brand new programming, such as additional bathrooms or additional kitchen or additional electrical room and so forth. We actually use an entirely different language to distinguish the new from the old. For example, as you can see in this middle image, is that those wooden boxes hold a sort of a service beverage area to the left for the case of event. In the middle portion are mechanical, electrical rooms, and to the right are brand new offices that the nonprofit who's running it now desperately need. But clearly, when you look at this, you don't really have any confusion as to what was the original and what was a new intervention. Next. So one of the main key elements of the space, and what's so wonderful about the space, is just so spectacularly tall and long, right? So it serves a utility that's not a community center, but a scale of which really works very, very well for a large gathering. So everything that we try to do is in a way to preserve the essence of this building. So for example, all the infrastructure that needed to be added, it was added to the sort of the basement level. As you can see, under that glass vitrines are a tunnel that used to run all the services. So we use that to run all the new services. And any lighting that needs to be added, any new mechanical that needs to be added, it's always very carefully to weave between the original envelope. So essentially we try to make it disappear as much as possible, including the sprinkler lines, the lighting, any of the additional utilities are run behind the crane to the left and the right, and so forth. Next. Oh, I should go back. I'm sorry. Could you go back a bit? Sorry. So I just want to bring out too is that this is a multi-purpose community space, and to which our ambition is not only meeting its performance, its art exhibition. So to which end that we sort of set up this kind of additional perforated liner in the lower right-hand corner, which if the community choose to, they could actually have local art exhibitions, which can be displayed there. And the lighting in the crane would be sufficient to light that artwork. Next. And we tried to preserve everything we could possibly preserve. Nothing was thrown out. So for example, the skylight crank in the left image, even though the skylight is no longer functional, we kept all the cranes. The middle part is basically the gantry rail, which moves back and forth, which still functions. That essentially allows them to pick up the equipment to service it and drop it back down. We just wanted to keep every part of the building as much as we can possibly manage. Next. So part of one of the most difficult aspect of it is that this building essentially does not meet obviously current seismic requirements. And interestingly enough, this building was actually damaged twice. The first time it actually was in the 1906 earthquake, and they actually the top half of the building completely sort of crumpled away, and they actually added a second half back in. So that's an actual post 1906 earthquake repair. And now obviously we're doing the second time. But so one of the strategies we want to adopt is that when we actually need to reinforce, we want to do it in a way that really respects the original structural logic of the building. So this building is made of these kind of series of grids with where the brick pilaster, as you can see there. And we basically use that as a main strategy to brace it. So we added additional steel framing that follows the grid, and we added additional cross framing. As you can see, is sort of the art display case I was talking about. The art display wall I was talking about before. Top of that, there's a steel bracing that basically essentially pushes the brick, that sort of braces the brick wall. And at the corner of each of this building are these kind of concrete walls, which lines the ends. So it basically bookends the building to kind of keep it as rigid as possible. Next. So these are some examples of the surfaces that we try to preserve. You can see some of the graffitis are still intact. Some of the sort of paint that's being peeled off, we actually encapsulated that in clear sealer. And then where we added lights, as you can see, we use that to, in a way, to sort of highlight the architecture feature of the building. There's the row of lights at each side of the crane, and there's light within the victories, for example. Next, additional examples of the beautiful patina this building does have, and to the extent we were able to save it. Next.
Okay, here you can see another example, these new structural glass floors that enclose the existing openings in the floor where the turbine engines, which you can see on the upper left, once sat. There are 3 of these openings in the floor. One of them is underneath this plywood box where this gentleman is sitting, and we very carefully infilled that particular vitrine so that in a future phase of work, it could be reopened. So nothing was permanently closed. And then the other 2 openings received the structural glass floor, where now they have lighting as well. So they look beautiful empty, but we're also hoping they'll be used to display art and other objects in the future. I want to note that our team, sorry, if you can go back, well, actually this slide's fine. Our team partnered with the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office throughout design and construction on this project to ensure that every piece of restoration and every adaptive change that we were undertaking would meet SHPO's strict standards. And that approach was critical for the city in order to secure the historic tax credits to fund the project. And another piece I want to mention while we're on this slide of how things were adaptively reused. So all of the historic windows were rehabilitated, but the surrounding area is quite noisy because it's an existing transportation hub. So there are streetcars that roll by to this day around on basically all 4 sides. So we worked carefully to come up with an interior window detail that would preserve the appearance of these beautiful historic windows, but also add a layer of acoustic protection so that when you're inside the space, it has a much better acoustic separation from the outside than it could have had before. And so, sorry, that was the last slide, but we have a couple more lines. So the completion of this project has created a really unique space for the Excelsior community, which is a historically underserved San Francisco neighborhood, by providing this community event space and performance space. And additionally, it's now serving as a children's art and education center for the neighborhood. The current programming is run by the Performing Arts Workshop, and they're a not-for-profit dedicated to advancing equity and arts education with a focus on underserved communities. And the Powerhouse in future will feature a range of community-focused programming for the whole community as well.
Thank you. That's wonderful, Tori and Kent. We need to move on to Presidio, but we'll see you in just a few minutes for the Q&A. Right, John?
Yes, and while you're starting your slides, I just wanted to mention that to remind people to join Thursday's program, and there will be a special feature on the Geneva Car Barn. You won't want to miss it. It'll be about halfway through the program, so we hope you've registered for the Design Awards this Thursday. If not, you can visit our website. I see the slide is up, so I'm going to turn my sound off now.
And go ahead, Mark and Jim, go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then I'll tell me next when you want to go to the next slide.
Well, thank you. Very much. And to CPF, Cindy, John, Chris, thanks so much for organizing today and bringing us all together. So I'm Mark Hornberger, with me, Jim Degner, who I'm not sure if Jim is on yet, but we'll be chatting about the Presidio Theater project. Our architecture firm is based here in San Francisco. Last year celebrated our 40th year in continuous business. So I'd like to just recognize other members of the team who may be on. Plant Construction was the general contractor of the project. Our preservation consultant was Knapp Architects, and a particular shout out to Ruchira, who is a member of that group, but really worked so closely with us, particularly on documenting the tax credit portions of the project. And tax credits were key to the financial success of getting this project realized. So thank you, Ruchira. But RHAA, our landscape architect, Pharrell and Elsesser, structural engineer, Dennis Paoletti, acoustical engineer, and Joel Roos, who is the owner's project rep during the construction. Next slide, please. So the Presidio Theater was built in 1939 in the Presidio. This was a purpose-built movie theater intended to provide entertainment to the servicemen based there at the Presidio, but it was also a place where there could be presentations to the troops prior to muster. But the theater, built in 1939, ceased operation 1994 and had sat up until 2014 basically vacant, roof leaking, mold forming, structurally inadequate, antiquated mechanical electrical systems. So it needed a lot of TLC and a really good sponsor. And so enter our client, Peggy Haas, of the Haas family, who really was interested, because of her thespian background, to create a community organization-based theater where small performing groups could come together in an affordable way, have a place to showcase their talents. So converting this movie theater to a place where you could have musical theater, you could have dance, you could have musical ensembles, you could have graduations, you could have folkloricos, magic events, was something she was quite interested in. And she took us over to the Presidio Theater one day in 2014 and said, do you think we could rehabilitate this? Do you think we could expand it? Will the Park Service let us do that? So that was the beginning of our work on the project. Next, please. So here's a plan of the theater as it is today. The rectangle on the right-hand side is basically the audience hall. At the time we arrived, the theater seated 900 with very narrow seats that had already been replaced once, so they were not the historic seats. But importantly, the stage where you see number 12 here was only 16 feet deep, and it only needed to be that depth in order to have someone get up on the stage and give a talk to the troops, or have a small instrumental group, or primarily show movies. So could we make it deeper without affecting the other contributing resources to this National Historic District? And in order to do that, we needed to add space. We needed to create a basement. Next slide, please. And you see here on the lower level where there was only mechanical equipment up in the upper right-hand corner previously, we ended up excavating, creating changing rooms, bathrooms, makeup areas, rehearsal rooms, storage areas, and outside the footprint of the building, underground public bathrooms, lobby, and concession space so that we could keep the area around the historic building as open as possible. Next slide, please. So here you see a view in the early 1940s of a group. Bob Hope gave a small comedy performance here along with Jerry Colonna. But you can see a couple of elements that we're going to talk about in our presentation. This very narrow depth of the stage from the front skirt to the back. This movie screen is right against an existing back concrete wall that borders Bliss, which is one of the historic contributing streets, and couldn't be changed in the Presidio. You also see on the left-hand side the proscenium arch here, this solid, massive plaster vertical arch element that surrounded the stage, and the acoustic wall elements to the left, which created a very absorptive, dull space, which was perfect for theater, but not very good for live performance. Next, please. So,
Okay.
Jim.
Yeah, so this is during construction when we had taken out the seats, which were moldy and caused, I was sick after being in the space for a day measuring. Once the seats were removed, the air cleared up pretty well. And then when we took off this, they had put paneling on the walls, asbestos sheet paneling on the walls in the 60s. When we took that down, we discovered that the old stuff, the old kind of made out of fiber back in the 1930s, which was not asbestos, that soundboard was still there. And we liked the pattern was still there. And we intended to keep it to some extent. We did keep some of it on the back wall where it was useful acoustically, but like Mark said, that wasn't useful acoustically here. We needed reflective surfaces, not this. So we fabricated out of MDF, painted with a Zolatone kind of textured paint, and also slightly angled downward. We recreated this stripe pattern, this major minor stripe pattern. Then you can see the proscenium here. That's sort of the full Art Deco-y plaster proscenium, and also the perimeter plaster of this ceiling, that ribbed thing on the side, and you can see the original anemostats. The next slide, please. So here we are. We've gutted it a bit more. You can see these anemostats. They were like the originally they provided heat, came down from there, and there was return air below. We reversed that in our scheme. When we did the underground renovation, we were able to put in ductwork and have a new AHU system that delivered heat below the seats, and these turned into return air, which was a much better system, also for smoke evac and all that kind of stuff. So we did end up, when we did change the size of this auditorium space by moving the proscenium forward, we had to reposition the front four of these, progressively to fit the new dimensions of the thing, but the back two stayed in place. You can see the very back one on the right was the most damaged, but that was the one that stayed in place. The next one, the next slide shows a close-up of the anemostat. Next slide, please. So we, at one point, next slide, please. We were trying to we even looked at replacing the hemostats, but the plants plasters were pretty damn good, and they figured out they sold us on the fact that they could make them better. Here's the proscenium, one leg of the proscenium, and this we had originally planned for this to be chopped up into like 4 or 5 pieces and then moved. But Plant had a contractor who was a subcontractor that was good at doing amazing things, and he said that he could do it all in one piece. So one morning, this was all set up, and it was put on like these huge roller skates and moved forward by just brute force of, men with walkie-talkies and, come-alongs. That was a pretty exciting day. Next. So here's, this is a guy on what was called the ballroom floor. This is scaffolding up to the ceiling. And this is Meiswinkle or, others replastering and refinishing and tying in the plaster surround that we kept to the new location of the proscenium. And, there was a little bit of patchwork, most of it was saved. The middle of the ceiling was replaced. The field of the ceiling was replaced because it needed so much seismic upgrading and it was damaged. And they did a better job of it. We put in new lights and new speakers and stuff. And the back third of it, it was not replaced. It was replaced. It was left open and replaced with a Eurospan ceiling, so we could that was part of the acoustic plan. We needed the reverberation was trapped in the high ceiling, the high seats and low ceiling created like a little trap. So that's open to the attic space. So the acoustics came out really great.
Next, please. So here you see the new deeper stage. We've moved the proscenium into the audience hall and reconfigured it, cut down the seating count. Remember, we're talking about a tax credit project here. So National Park Service, Antonio Aguilar was looking and working with us week to week. And so you can see the new partial fly grid, lighting, and gives us this really multi-purpose new stage area. Next, please. Here you can see from the audience hall the same aisle pattern of seating, cross aisles, but we have new handicapped access, flat ramps to the stage on left and right, the deep stage now, and a way for audience to interact more directly than previously. Next, please. And in the front of house spaces, all these wonderful plaster details remain, but ceilings decayed. Next, please. And you can see here with new carpeting, working on the themes from the previous deco interiors of the theater, saving the hardware and rehabilitating hardware, door closers and other elements. So these historic spaces brought back to new life. Next, please. And just briefly, this is an area where we created a new outdoor porch cover, of course, reversible, covering the historic exit from the west side of the building. You can see the North Pavilion here with its green room overlooking outdoor lawn activity area. And below this are all these back of house functions hidden from view. Next, please. So here's Plant and their teams working under the audience hall to excavate for future cast changing rooms and bathrooms. Next, please. And you can see Plant's crews excavating for the underground facilities next to that door, which leads out on the west side from the audience hall. And this will, in the future, of course, be covered with outdoor lawn activity. Next, please. And here is that space, same door, same building. And you can see some touches. For instance, we took off all the historic barrel tile, resheathed for seismic the roof, re-waterproofed, put back copper gutters and leaders, replaced all the historic tile back in place. And the new pavilions have flat Gladdy McBean tile, same color match, but flat so you can tell the difference in era for the construction. Next, please. And of course, what better time to go and visit a theater than the evening? And so lighting and differentiation of the new spaces from historic were important, but having this welcoming, next please, for audiences who have loved to be in the space, watching children's theater, watching magic and musical. And so it was just a great privilege to be able to be part of it and see this completed. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Mark and Jim, for your presentation. I was especially amazed at that one picture you showed, the door and then the lawn, and you're like, that's the same place. And I said, there's no way. John, so do you want to explain what we're going to do next?
Yeah, at this moment, we're going to break out into smaller rooms, and each of you will have the ability to choose the room you'd like to join. And because we're running a little later today, what we're going to do, as long as the speakers are willing to stick around for a few more minutes, is we're going to end the breakout rooms at 1:10 p.m. So we'll still have a little bit of time in the breakout rooms for questions. I've seen a few questions in the chat box. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. Before we go into the break rooms, just wanted to encourage everybody to turn on your cameras. And then I see a few board members in here. Thank you, CPF board members, for joining us today. I also see some other project participants like Ruchira. So whatever room you choose, I'm sure there will be some other people engaged. So thank you all for coming today, and I'm going to start the breakout rooms right now. I will be in the Darling Hotel. Cindy will be joining the Geneva Car Barn group, and Chris will be here leading the conversation for
Presidio.
for the
And if you
Presidio.
can't see where the rooms are, you go at the bottom. Oh, you can. John just did it. Okay, everyone can go join their rooms, and we'll start discussion here in just a second. Hey, everybody. Okay, so what we want to do.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good, good.
Great. So I'm going to